This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self-Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy. Reportedly, a few years after Walt Disney's death in 1966, a reporter had sat down and asked Roy Disney if he thought the plans to build Disney World and Epcot Center would ever come to fruition. Roy responded that he was confident that eventually it would, and that particular dream of Walt's would be finally realized. The reporter said that the event would likely be bittersweet because sadly his brother Walt had passed away years earlier and he wouldn't get to actually see the project come to life. Without hesitation, Roy responded, "Walt saw it first. That's why you'll get to see it." Walt Disney had envisioned Epcot Center long before construction began, and it was that vision that guided its creation. A dream that, as Roy accurately predicted, came true on October 1st, 1982, the opening day of Disney World and Epcot Center. Leadership is the ability to see beyond the present, anticipating the needs and possibilities that might not yet be visible to others. Just as Walt saw Epcot's potential before the first brick was laid, businesses that prioritize well-being as a core value are able to anticipate and address the hidden underlying issues that can hinder success. They understand that well-being is not just about short-term fixes like offering gym memberships or healthcare plans, although both of those things are highly valuable. But having well-being as part of the DNA of your organization goes beyond that. It's about creating an environment where people feel valued, supported, and connected. When companies quote unquote see it first, they don't wait for a crisis like burnout or employee disengagement to arise before they take action. In today's relentless, fast-paced world where personal and professional demands increasingly seem to be colliding, the concept of well-being has transcended beyond being a personal luxury. It's evolved into a fundamental business strategy. Well-being is no longer about, just ticking the boxes or having it be an HR initiative. It's about building it into the very fabric of your culture. As organizations confront modern challenges like burnout, absenteeism, disengagement, and mental health crises, prioritizing employee well-being has become not only advantageous, but essential. The organizations that embed well-being into their core values aren't just improving productivity or reducing turnover. They're transforming into indispensable partners for their clients. So in this episode, we're going to talk about why well-being is everyone's priority. We're going to explore how businesses can elevate their role from a service provider to a true strategic partner by embracing well-being. We're going to share some stories, some real-life examples, as well as some insights from leading thought leaders as we start to unpack how this shift can redefine your organizational structure and your client relationships. Seth Godin, in his best-selling book, Linchpin, shares a powerful insight that applies to any industry. He says that when your clients consider you indispensable, it's not because you're doing the job that they hired you for. It's because you're solving the problems they didn't realize they had. I think this insight encapsulates why businesses that embrace well-being become essential. By addressing the hidden underlying issues like stress, mental health challenges, and disengagement, organizations offer solutions that go beyond the superficial and go beyond the obvious. So imagine that there's a marketing firm hired to increase a client's digital presence. They could deliver effective campaigns and generate clicks, but what if they noticed that the client's teams were overstressed and unmotivated, which could be a root cause to the results they're getting in their marketing department? What if instead of just simply focusing on the immediate deliverables, the firm also introduced mindfulness workshops, stress management training, and team building exercises as part of their service? Not only were they able to deliver on the fundamentals that they were hired for, but the company starts to notice that performance and productivity increases. Not just in the marketing department, but they notice this across the organization. Suddenly, they're not just solving the problem of low engagement rates. They're addressing the unseen human factors causing the deeper issue. By showing empathy and foresight, this firm quickly becomes more than just someone that the organization hired to do a job. They become an indispensable partner. In Getting Naked, business consultant Patrick Lencioni tells a story about a consulting firm that chose vulnerability and honesty over traditional sales tactics. In one example, a consultant sat in a boardroom and openly admitted to not knowing the answer to a complex problem that the company was facing. Instead of losing trust, the client saw this as an act of vulnerability and honesty, qualities that laid the foundation for a strong, enduring, transparent relationship. I think Lencioni's message here is rather clear, that lasting client relationships are built not on perfect knowledge, but on trust, vulnerability, and transparency. This lesson is highly relevant when we're discussing well-being. Well-being initiatives, particularly those that address sensitive topics like mental health, they demand vulnerability. Employees and clients alike need to feel that their well-being concerns are going to be met with openness, not judgment, or even worse, dismissal. By creating spaces where vulnerability is welcomed, companies can build stronger, more transparent relationships with clients as well as employees. So I've long been a fan of Jay Abraham. And in the Sticking Point Solution, Jay Abraham highlights that there's an importance around being able to not just meet, but anticipate clients' needs. Being able to position yourself as a strategic partner rather than a mere service provider. With increasing competition and rising consumer expectations, simply delivering on a contract isn't enough anymore. Companies have to think ahead, anticipate pain points, and offer solutions before problems have a chance to escalate. So take the example of a global consulting firm that noticed an uptick in stress-related absenteeism across their clients. Rather than waiting for the clients to request help, the firm went ahead and proactively introduced a well-being program. Now, this initiative covered stress management, mental health resources, and resilience training. The result? Clients not only saw improvements in absenteeism, but also reported higher employee satisfaction and engagement. By addressing the problems before they became a crisis, the consulting firm was able to position itself as a long-term strategic partner, demonstrating that they had the foresight and empathy that went beyond the immediate scope of work. So let's talk about shifts in perspectives. I don't know if you've ever seen this image, but it's frequently utilized in self-help books and in seminars. I've used it myself. It's the classic optical illusion of the old lady and the young woman. So at first glance, some people, if you know what I'm talking about, you see this old lady, while other people in the room instantly see a young woman. Now, if they're seeing it for the first time, which is unlikely in today's day and age, but when we used to do this, it was funny having two people sitting next to each other and thinking the other one had gone mad. Like, that is clearly a young woman in her prime. And the other person's like, are you kidding? Like, do you not get out much? She's at least 90 years old. But what happens is, if you stare at the picture long enough, you experience a perceptual shift. You'll start to see both images. And once you recognize the alternative image and your perspective shifts, you can no longer unsee it. It's impossible to ever look at that image again and not see both images appear. And this simple visual trick is a powerful metaphor explaining the shifts in perspectives that occur in business relationships, especially when it comes to well-being. Much like the illusion, clients may initially see your company through one lens, as a provider of some type of service. But once you help them recognize the broader value of what it is you offer, particularly in areas they haven't considered, such as employee well-being and its impact on tangible performance, their perspective shifts. They can't unsee your potential to solve the deeper problems that drive their long-term success. And in this sense, the transition from provider to partner hinges on your ability to facilitate these perspective shifts for your clients. So when you take a look at what clients really need. Beneath the surface of every organization, there are complex needs related to human well-being. There always have been. It's just becoming staggeringly obvious now as the problems of ignoring this are expanding to a critical pain point. So clients often come to you with one set of expectations, but their most critical challenges are often a lot deeper than they realize. And addressing those hidden needs transforms your role from merely delivering on a contract to becoming a partner. So let's take an example from a small school district in the United States that had been struggling with high employee absenteeism and low morale. Now, traditional healthcare benefits obviously were in place, but the employees within the culture felt disconnected, stressed, and unsupported. The solution was a comprehensive well-being program that covered mental health, stress management, leadership development, and coaching strategies, integrating mindfulness into their daily workflow. Within about 18 months, absenteeism dropped by 30%, and employee engagement scores started to surge. And it wasn't just about offering more benefits. It was about fostering a culture where people felt valued and cared for. In the same way, any organization that focuses on employee well-being is going to see profound shifts. It's not just a shift in individual productivity, but in overall organizational health. And the key is identifying the hidden needs and addressing them holistically. There's an old story, and I have often shared this in leadership seminars. It's about two stonecutters working side by side. And they were doing brutally difficult work on an impossibly hot summer's day. And they had been out there for hours, and they were going to be out there for many more hours in the intensity of the hot sun. And a priest was walking in a courtyard, and he saw how hard these two men were working, at the intensity of their focus and their efforts. And he asked them, well, what are you doing? And the first stonecutter replies, well, I'm cutting stone. And the second one, however, with unbridled enthusiasm says, I am building a magnificent cathedral. Now, both of these individuals were performing the same task, but their perspectives were vastly different. Now, this story highlights a lot of important lessons. Two of these important lessons are around the significance of vision and purpose in the workplace. These are two elements that are deeply tied to employee well-being. When employees see their work as part of something bigger, they feel more engaged, purposeful, and motivated. Well-being initiatives help employees connect with a higher purpose in their work, transforming their daily tasks from stone cutting, if you will, into cathedral building. There was a study by Gallup that found that employees who are engaged and have high well-being, self-reported high well-being, are 45% more likely to report high levels of adaptability in the workplace. In other words, they're more resilient, and they're 41% less likely to miss work due to health reasons. So these findings demonstrate that integrating well-being into the organizational culture not only boosts performance, but reduces the costly impact of things like high absenteeism. Imagine what would happen if every organization adapted well-being as a core value. Employees would not only be healthier and more engaged, but businesses would also thrive. The ripple effects would extend far beyond the individual employees, affecting the entire organizational ecosystem. By integrating well-being into the culture, employees are able to move from merely offering a paycheck to becoming a place where people get to thrive. So let's talk about disruptors of well-being. Like, what's getting in the way? Why are organizations not doing this already? And I think while the importance of well-being is clear, there's a lot of barriers that have prevented organizations from fully embracing it. To elevate client values through well-being partnerships, companies have to first address the major disruptors in the workplace. And that's not easy. These disruptors, they range from stress and burnout to inadequate mental health support. And they undermine both employee performance and, as I've said earlier, organizational success on many different levels. So I think there are basically 10 disruptors. I mean, there are probably more, and there might be 5 that are really significant. But I want to talk about 10 major disruptors that I think are stopping from organizations really being able to embrace and execute well-being as a fundamental element of development and leadership and a coaching-based organization. So the first one could be lack of work-life balance. And I know work-life balance is tricky. Nothing in life is ever really balanced. I mean, sometimes you just got to go all in because your family needs you. Sometimes you got to take a break so you can come back and be more creative. And sometimes, you're just working an exorbitant greater number of hours because that's what the time of year or the project requires. But let's take a look at people's perception. Right? Because there's 3 levels of reality. There's absolute reality where our opinions don't affect anything. I might have an opinion of like the sun rising in the west doesn't alter the fact of where the sun rises and where it sets. I have my personal reality though. That's how I feel. And that shifts my mental models, my maps that I use to navigate through the world. And it creates a reality that feels just as real to me. And then we have at another level, collective reality. So let's examine that. A survey by Deloitte found that 77% of professionals reported experiencing burnout at their current job. So regardless of how we look at that, that's not a good thing. Because in the same survey, 91% of them said that unmanageable stress negatively affects their work. We've all heard about high-profile stories about work-life imbalance at organizations like, Amazon, where grueling schedules have led to high attrition rates and public criticism. But one of the most poignant stories of work-life balance comes from Japan, a country that is known for their culture of extreme dedication. And the term karyoshi literally translates into, quote, death from overwork, unquote. I mean, and this is reflecting a tragic reality in which employees die from heart attacks, strokes, or suicide linked to overwork. So in 2013, a 31-year-old journalist that was working for the national broadcaster, NHK, wow, that's almost a tongue twister. Well, basically, this person died from heart failure after logging 159 hours of overtime in a single month. Now, her story sparked widespread conversations about work-life balance in Japan and led to the government needing to get involved to drive legislative changes aimed at reducing overwork. And I think the lesson for organizations is clear. Work-life balance is not just a matter of convenience. It's a matter of life and death. Businesses that take proactive steps to address work-life balance, such as offering flexible work schedules and promoting time-off policies, not only protect their employees, but also enhance productivity and long-term loyalty. Second factor that creates a barrier to implementing well-being is high levels of stress and burnout. A healthcare crisis that has been pervasive in developed nations, I would go as far to say globally, is burnout. Burnout isn't confined to high-powered corporate jobs. It's become endemic in industries like healthcare, where the stakes are especially high. I mean, think about that for a second. In one particularly alarming survey, 42% of physicians reported feeling burnt out. As a result, patients suffer, and the system bears a heavy financial burden. Stanford University estimates that workplace stress in the U.S. alone costs the economy about $190 billion a year in healthcare expenses. One inspiring example of an organization addressing burnout is Intel. Recognizing the increasing levels of employee stress, Intel launched a company-wide quote-unquote burnout recovery initiative that focused on setting realistic expectations, offering mental health breaks, and encouraging work-life balance. As a result, they improved employee satisfaction, performance, and retention. By addressing burnout head-on rather than ignoring it, what a novel concept. Intel proved that caring for employee well-being directly contributes to corporate success. A third detractor of a wellness-based organization is psychological safety. Psychological safety isn't just about people feeling safe, which is important in and of itself. It is a catalyst for innovation. So psychological safety, or the freedom to speak up without fear of retribution, has been directly linked to team effectiveness. So I've talked about on this show a lot Google's Project Aristotle that found that teams with high psychological safety outperformed other teams by a whopping 12%. And this is in part because employees felt empowered to take risks and share their creative ideas. The lack of psychological safety, however, can stifle innovation and trust, and the results can be catastrophic. So I'm talking about Boeing's 737 MAX crisis. Employees felt unable to raise concerns about safety issues, fearing retaliation. I mean, this is kind of like what happened with Volkswagen. But just getting back to Boeing, the company's failure to foster an environment of psychological safety led to catastrophic consequences like accidents, massive financial losses, and damage to the company's reputation. So if you take that and you contrast it with organizations like Intel, or organizations like Pixar that famously embrace psychological safety through its brain trust meetings, where employees were encouraged to offer candid feedback without fear, this open culture fueled Pixar's success as a leading innovator in the film industry. So the fourth detractor is mental health support. While many companies have taken steps to address physical health, mental health support remains inadequate in most workplaces. There was a McKinsey study that found that 75% of employees believe that mental health support is critical, but only 50% feel that their organizations provide enough resources. The gap between what employees need and what companies offer is shrinking. So one company that's leading the charge in mental health is Starbucks. They not only expanded mental health benefits, but also partnered with Lyra Health to provide therapy for employees. These initiatives have significantly reduced employee burnout and improved retention. The success of Starbucks mental health programs demonstrates that when organizations invest in employees' emotional well-being, the workforce, as well as the bottom line, will benefit. Detractor number 5 is unclear leadership and lack of support. So Gallup's research shows that 70% of the variance in team engagement is attributed to the quality of the manager. So I'm just going to recommend the book, It's the Manager by Clifton and Harder, researchers from the Gallup organization. They go deeply into this. And they assert that poor leadership is a major disruptor of well-being. It might be the biggest disruptor of well-being. It creates confusion, stress, and lack of support. And perhaps one of the most infamous examples of leadership failure is the Wells Fargo scandal. Do you remember this? It was if you live in the United States, I know a lot of you don't, but there was this scandal at Wells Fargo, which is a major bank based in the US, where there were aggressive sales targets and leadership was pushing employees to open up an unbelievable amount of unauthorized accounts. Now, that made it out into the press, and obviously nobody was happy about it. That toxic leadership culture led to plummeting employee morale, disengagement, and a loss of trust. In contrast, companies like Unilever have invested heavily in leadership development programs that emphasize emotional intelligence and support. And by fostering a leadership culture built on empathy and care, Unilever has improved employee well-being, engagement, and productivity. So the contrast between Wells Fargo and Unilever highlights the importance of leadership in creating positive well-being focused cultures. The sixth detractor is high workload and unrealistic expectations. All right, so let's get back to Amazon. Unrealistic workloads are a leading cause of burnout, and a 2021 Deloitte study found that nearly half the respondents reported working in high-pressure environments with unrealistic expectations. Amazon, notorious for setting unattainable performance targets, provides a well-documented example of this, where employees have described physical and mental exhaustion due to unreasonably overwhelming workloads. Now, when you take companies like Buffer, right, they've taken the opposite approach. They've implemented a 4-day work week to reduce stress and improve productivity. Research from Iceland supports that this model, putting employees on a 4-day work schedule, reported greater well-being without sacrificing productivity. By setting realistic expectations and promoting work-life balance, organizations can prevent burnout and foster long-term employee engagement, which more than almost anything else supports the bottom line in a sustainable way. Now, I was one of these people that kind of criticized the 4-day work week. I was like, that is impossible. Like, even a 5-day work week is something that at times in my life I've scoffed at. But what's interesting is when you look at the data of what happens after these 4-day work weeks are implemented in different parts of the world, productivity does not suffer. So turns out I was wrong. I think the 7th detractor is autonomy and control. Autonomy is a critical factor in personal and organizational engagement, as well as job satisfaction. Without autonomy, we're not deeply, enduringly committed to anything, and we're not going to get satisfaction from our work. And if we don't get satisfaction, it impairs emotional engagement and cognition, both of which is kind of important when innovation is the key to performance long-term with most companies. So research by DC and Ryan shows that when employees have control over their work, they feel more engaged and less likely to experience burnout. So companies like Atlassian have embraced this by offering employees ship-it days. These things are 48 hours where they can go ahead and work on any project that they're passionate about. Not the first company to do this. And by the way, a lot of innovative products have been created from initiatives exactly like this. So when employees feel this sense of autonomy, it fosters innovation. They become more creative and they become more satisfied in their job. So they do this stuff and they're innovative and creative longer. On the other hand, let's take a look at organizations with historically rigid hierarchies, like the now defunct Lehman Brothers. Remember them? Yeah. So they experienced high levels of disengagement, and that disengagement did not help their downfall. So empowering employees with autonomy not only boosts engagement, but drives innovation and long-term success. So let's talk about underinvestment in well-being initiatives. Missed opportunities, like seeing an abundance in data, but doing nothing. That seems to be what's happening a lot. Despite the clear evidence now that well-being programs offer strong returns on investment, many companies still underinvest in comprehensive initiatives. Or it's like, okay, yeah, I know this is important. I get what the data is saying, but let's just focus on our budget targets for this quarter. We'll do this next year. Again, so from a standout example from Deloitte itself, which launched the mental health baseline program, they were able to integrate mental health discussions into annual health assessments. And this program provided employees with access to mental health apps, therapy, and financial wellness programs. So there's a lot of areas of wellness and well-being that are overlooked, like community, cultural well-being. How much do you love where you live? Job-related, career well-being, which again, Gallup says is based on their extensive data, the number one driver of wellness. You have social well-being, financial well-being. And I think the reason why these things are overlooked is because as a society and as an industry, we failed to clearly define what well-being is. I was watching an advert the other day where this woman, you've probably seen it, where a smoothie blew up in her face and she's like, oh, I just love wellness. Wellness is not about smoothies, granola, and yoga poses, although no problem with any of that. It's about something so comprehensive that it encompasses, according to a consultant I had a personal conversation with from the Gallup organization, it encompasses everything you love, what you think about most of the time, and your experience of life. So when you talk about organizations like Deloitte, 2 years into this initiative, they increased an improvement in employee well-being and reduced absenteeism by 20%. And what's the takeaway here, Bobby? And thank you. I'm glad you asked. The takeaway here is that well-being initiatives, they have to be holistic and comprehensive. They can't just focus on physicality. They have to also focus on the inseparable elements of mental, emotional, social, and financial well-being. Just to name a few. There's a lot more to it than that, but it's got to be comprehensive and address the whole employee, not just as an asset to the organization, but as a fully functioning human being. And companies that invest in these programs not only see improved employee health, but they see improved productivity and reduced turnover, which is critical. So here's the ninth detractor: employee engagement. Employee engagement, obviously, thank you, Captain Obvious, for pointing this out, but it's a critical component of workplace well-being. Again, Gallup, who is they're just championing the research in this space. I'm becoming increasingly more of a Gallup fan weekly. And what they discovered is, and I know these stats are coming out of the US, and I know a lot of people listening to this, you don't reside in the US, but these things might be a little bit higher in terms of the economic cost because of the population density in the US. But lack of well-being is a growing epidemic with catastrophic outcomes for organizations throughout the entire globe right now. So this is not a US problem. This is a developed nation problem. Only 32% of US employers are actively engaged in work. So disengaged people at work cost businesses upwards of $550 billion a year in lost productivity in the US. So that's staggering. I guarantee you it is no less impressive, and I don't mean impressive in a good way, clearly, in multiple other countries. So, but the issue that I have is the causes of disengagement are often tied to poor well-being. So we'll develop leadership courses and sales courses, but we don't invest in courses and resources that elevate well-being. So you have burnout and stress driving employees to mentally check out. Now, Salesforce has tackled this issue by focusing on employee engagement programs like the Campono, which blends leadership development with wellness initiatives, which is critically important because leadership and wellness, in terms of what characteristics they facilitate with employees, teams, and throughout the entire organization systemically, are very, very similar. I did this in a workshop recently, a large workshop at a school district, where we brought up, the two levers that drive high performance are management and leadership. And we talked, what's the difference? What goes under management and what goes under leadership? And when we created another column, what goes under well-being? What does well-being support? The columns between leadership's responsibilities and what well-being drives were nearly identical. So by prioritizing employee well-being and fostering a culture of care, organizations like Salesforce in this instance has been able to measurably increase employee satisfaction, innovation, and retention. So let's talk about the final detractor: communication and collaboration. Effective communication and collaboration are essential for reducing workplace stress and fostering engagement. So in Gallup's State of the Global Workforce report, they highlight that poor communication is a leading cause of disengagement and stress. And think about this, right? Think about not being heard, not being seen, working in an environment where there is very little interpersonal engagement, very little empathy. You don't feel validated. Your efforts aren't even noticed. That can cause a lot of stress. As a matter of fact, is that not a major reason why people leave and companies have to pay upwards of 3 times their annual salary to replace those people that could have been better served and retained through well-being, care, empathy, and employee satisfaction in the first place? But when you take a look at organizations that are not doing it right, nothing gets me more excited than looking at organizations that do. Like Zappos, for example, prioritizing open communication, transparency, and collaboration, and significantly reducing stress and boosting a sense of team morale at the same time. Now, Zappos is famous for having adapted a flat organizational structure. Not saying that's for everyone, but in their culture, it encourages employees to voice their opinion, and it enables them environmentally to collaborate a little bit more freely. And this approach not only fostered a more positive work environment, but also increased innovation. Now, in contrast, companies that had traditionally siloed communication structures, I want to point out, because I just was up in Rochester recently, Kodak struggled to innovate and adapt to changing markets because of the siloed communication structures, and that ultimately contributed to their downfall. So by addressing all of these disruptors, organizations can become indispensable to their clients. Just like Johnson & Johnson implemented a robust well-being program focusing on physical health, mental well-being, and financial fitness. Over a decade, their financial investment was $2. Their financial return on investment was $2.71 for every dollar spent. How many dollars would you invest if that was your return? So, but that's not the point at its heart. The point is that financial gain wasn't the most significant outcome for that company. Employee engagement and job satisfaction was. So employees viewed Johnson & Johnson after that, not just as a workplace, but as a place that generally cared about their long-term health. So research from the Harvard Business Review further supports this narrative, showing that companies with comprehensive wellness programs saw a 25% reduction in absenteeism and a 32% reduction in healthcare costs. That goes beyond numbers. It speaks to the heart of what makes an organization indispensable. When employees feel supported, they're more engaged, they're more productive, and they're more loyal. So what we need to do is create a dialogue in our organizations around well-being. So if you're a manager, you're in leadership, or you're even an entrepreneur, or you're working as an intrapreneur within a large company, thinking about you and your colleagues, this affects everyone, because everyone is an ecosystem. And, one of the things that I absolutely am inspired by and I identify with is the power of storytelling. Like our organizations, our cultures, our global theologies, like everything about us as human beings has been shaped by the power of story. So when you have well-being initiatives, creating an open dialogue that allows for a narrative to emerge is critical. People often resist programs at first because they're skeptical of how it's going to fit into their life. I have so much on already, right? And now this thing is just, I know it's good for me, but it just seems like another thing to do. It's additive. As a matter of fact, I once had a conversation with an executive in an organization that said, our employees feel at first that well-being isn't something that we're doing for them. It's something that we're doing to them. But once these programs are personalized and rooted in real needs, engagement starts to skyrocket. So let's take the story of, again, a school district that introduced the Wellbeing Initiative through open forums with employees. Initially, there was pushback because employees didn't see how a mindfulness program or a financial wellness seminar would benefit their daily work. But as employees began sharing personal stories about stress, about burnout and financial struggles, the conversation shifted. They started to notice a commonality in the narratives. I start to see me in you and you in me. They realized that extending well-being, it impacted their lives far beyond just getting in shape or physical health. It touched upon emotional and mental stability. And within a year, engagement in the program, just from being allowed to generate a narrative, doubled. So the American Psychological Association found that organizations with high levels of employee involvement in a well-being initiative saw a 24% increase in satisfaction and a 21% improvement in productivity. And that shows that when employees feel heard and they're involved in shaping the very programs they're being asked to participate in, they're far more likely to engage and experience benefits. So mental health isn't a topic that can be sidelined or treated as an afterthought. If you're ignoring well-being, you're ignoring performance. Like, take that to your executives, take that to your board and say, you know what? I think that developing people to perform at a high level and increase our bottom line is too additive. We're going to pull back from that this year. It's a very different conversation than, we're going to put granola bars in vending machines in the employee lounge, isn't it? So as companies start to grapple with rising stress levels and employee burnout, which many are, mental health has to be at the forefront of well-being initiatives, because for too long, mental health programs have been reactive and offering therapy after a crisis. But what happens if organizations start to shift toward a more proactive approach? One company traditionally focused on physical health challenges like fitness competitions and nutritional counseling being offered within the walls of the organization. However, as stress levels and burnout started to rise, they introduced emotional resilience workshops and mindfulness training, and the impact was profound. Employees started reporting that they felt more in control of their emotions. So, in other words, greater emotional regulation and stress-related insurance claims dropped significantly. So, the World Health Organization reports that every dollar invested in mental health programs, there's a $4 return in improved health and productivity. But mental health initiatives have to go well beyond crisis interventions. Offering mindfulness programs, stress management workshops, and open dialogues about mental health can create a culture of care that helps employees not just survive the workday, but thrive as a result of it. So to become truly indispensable as a partner to your clients, you have to go beyond simply delivering services. I know that many of you work within the health industry and you work within the well-being industry. And for the first time that I've seen in 2 decades, the top priorities of organizations and the fitness/well-being industry are starting to converge. I think there's enormous opportunity for anybody entering into the space. So by advocating for well-being as a core part of an organization's culture, you position yourself as a key player in the long-term success. So I'm just going to talk about a consultant a while back for Virgin Active that offers a powerful example of this. So this consultant positioned himself as a strategic advisor, going beyond just selling education programs and exercise models and program design strategies. What this consultant worked with in collaboration with the outstanding executive fitness team within that organization at the time was kind of like reimagining their training department. And they started to focus on employee and instructor development and creating coaching-based engagement. And the results were transformative. So what resulted from this was a reported tripling, that's a word, yeah, of personal training revenues within just a couple of years. And that's significant. I mean, that brought some issues, but it was significant. And it showed a dramatic shift in the cultural identity and focus. So right before the pandemic, again, a Deloitte study found that if you prioritize well-being, and this is in 2019, where things did not escalate nearly to the levels they're at now, but there was a 6-to-1 return on investment. So if you're going to champion comprehensive well-being program, you elevate your role from vendor to partner. And if you're inside an organization, you become indispensable. So let's take a look at how to do this. Because I believe to achieve lasting success, organizations should adopt a holistic 3-level approach to well-being. And level 1 is immediate stress management. At this level, the focus is on providing employees with tools and techniques for immediate stress relief. This is when things are absolutely urgent and the stress levels are debilitating at the moment, or they're creating a lot of duress. So what can I do like right now in the moment to decrease my stress levels and improve my emotional and mental well-being? 3 things that come to mind that have this immediate effect are mindfulness, meditation, and movement, all of which can activate the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing the physiological markers of stress, such as an elevated heart rate and cortisol levels. So research from the American Psychological Association shows that mindfulness not only improves emotional regulation, but it reduces anxiety, and as a consequence, it enhances focus. I would go so far as to say it enhances a lot more cognitive capacities to just focus. But the bottom line is when you incorporate these practices into the daily lives of employees, it's just not a thing they can check off, or it's not just a meditation circle. It's part of their normal workflow. Companies could start to offer immediate release from acute stress, which improves productivity and fosters resilience. Level 2 is not immediate, but short-term improvements. Okay, so like what can your employees do, not just this moment, but from now to 3 months from now, let's say? I think this level focuses on building sustainable habits around healthy eating, around regular movement, even exercise, around improving quality of sleep, how they interpret stress, and how they manage stress. Research from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that things like a healthy diet reduces the risk of chronic disease, while exercise promotes neurogenesis and releases mood-boosting neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. Things like sleep, quality and quantity, improves cognition and emotional resilience on multiple levels. So when you start to encourage these habits, organizations can improve the short-term well-being of their employees, leading to greater engagement and performance. And then you have level 3. This is long-term organizational development. These are things that you can do from the next 3 to 6 months and beyond. And the final level integrates leadership development, cultural evolution, and personal and professional growth. I'm talking about leaders who are trained in empathy and emotional intelligence, fostering psychologically safe environments where employees feel valued. So research by Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence shows that these types of leaders typically create higher team performance, increased employee satisfaction, and greater organizational commitment. So moreover, like when you have organizations that are committed to creating a coaching-based culture, that helps organizations achieve sustainable behavior change to such a greater level of effectiveness than linear hierarchical directives. So coaching based on DC and Ryan's self-determination theory focuses on intrinsic motivations and creating environments where employees feel autonomous, competent, and connected to the meaning of their work. And these elements foster long-term engagement and well-being. By integrating coaching and empathy and listening, organizations can foster environments where employees experience reduced stress, heightened engagement, and improved well-being. So essentially, well-being is not optional anymore. It's a core part of building an engaged and productive workforce. By integrating well-being into the culture, I think organizations and individuals can not only improve performance, but transform how they live and work. So when you lead with strategic well-being as a solution, you address your clients' most significant pain points, your employees, your team members, etc. And basically you elicit attention and elevate your value within your position as a vendor, as an employee, or as a leader. You're not just improving health, you're positioning yourself as being an independent partner for your colleagues, for your employees, for your organization, for your own future. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at theselfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.